Third page on the seam allowances and seams, right here, again, you're going to define seam, seam allowance, backstitch, and press. This one's a little bit more in depth. You're going to take another 2 fabric squares that you have to cut from the scrap bin in the front. It's easier if your fabric has a pattern. With the right sides together, you're going to pin along the straight edge. So this is what the back of the fabric looks like, and this is what the front of the fabric looks like. You're going to grab your pin cushion. You're going to pin your 2 pieces of fabric together. Okay. Suggestion when you pin, every 2 fingers. Okay, every 2 to 3. The more pins you have, the easier it is to keep your fabric straight. If you notice, if you end up with a little bit of a gap at the end, you're more than welcome to put an extra pin here. You don't have to. Now, you're going to get your machine out and you're going to thread the machine. If you notice on the paper it says to sew a 5/8 seam allowance. So if you look on your slide plate, it says 1/8, 3/8, 5/8. You want to make sure that when you are stitching, the edge of your fabric matches up with the 5/8 line. So this little white line, and it continues up through here on the throat plate, it'll say 5/8. So when you're stitching, to keep your fabric straight, you should be watching the 5/8 line. Now, when you get your fabric set up on the 5/8 line, you're going to start sewing. You want to make sure that on your screen, on your LCD screen, it says 1, because that means you're stitching a straight line. If it's on 7, 8, 9, any other number than 1, you need to use the plus and minus button to get to the right stitch. You're going to be stitching the 5/8 line, and you need to back stitch. So all back stitching is a lock stitch. So you're going to go forward 3 times. 1, 2, 3. At this point, I'm going to take my pin out and put it in my pin cushion. Do not leave your pins just random on the table. Right above the start stop button is your reverse button. Okay, it looks like the Michigan U when you're driving. You have to hold this button down in order to back stitch. So we went forward 3 stitches. You're going to hold this button and you're going to go back 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. Now, at this point, you're going to continue to sew straight all the way down to the edge of the fabric. Okay? You can hold your fabric like this or like this. Don't keep your fingers near the presser foot. And watch the 5/8 line as you're sewing. Don't watch the needle. And as you get close to a pin, you take it out and you keep going. Now, when you get to the end, you have to do your locking stitches again. You have to back stitch. So what you're going to do is you're going to hold your reverse button. You go 1, 2, 3, and go back a couple stitches. At this point, you're going to lift your presser foot up. You're going to pull the threads off to the side like this. You can use your thread cutter, which is in the back here. Okay. Then you're going to look and see locking stitch, back here, locking stitch. At this point, you trim all your extra threads. Be careful not to cut your stitches. Remove your extra threads so they're not hanging off. Do it again for the opposite side. Like that. Okay, so you've created your stitch. Now, the last step in this is to press open your seam allowance. So you're gonna go over to the iron, you're gonna plug it in and wait for it to warm up. When your iron is heated up, you're gonna press this open. So I always like to go like this, and you're just gonna go straight down. Okay, that's all that it takes to press your seams open. You might have to go a couple times over it to make sure it's completely flat. You always want to make sure that your right sides are facing down when you're pressing a seam open. Your last step on this is to pin this to the paper where it shows, and you need to label the seam and label the seam allowance. So take one pin from your pin cushion, again pin it to your paper, take a marker, a pen. Okay. You're going to label your seam, which is right here. Your seam is this line that you stitched. So you put seam and draw an arrow. Your seam allowance is actually this width right here from the stitch line to the edge of the fabric. So you can draw an arrow and put seam allowance. Okay. So the seam is your actual stitch line. The seam allowance is the width from the edge of the fabric to the seam. Okay, and that completes page 3.